Hey everyone, welcome to another G News podcast. Today we are joined by Sandra Grey, who is the president of the Combined Trade Unions. Hey Sandra, welcome back to G News.
Look, it's great to be back. There's plenty happening out there, isn't there, to talk about?
There sure is. There's a whole lot going on in the economy. And last time we talked about the mood of the workforce survey. That's an annual survey that painted a very grim picture about financial security and hardship that workers were experiencing and a total lack of confidence that they had in this government. Can you refresh our memories a little bit about that and what you've heard from workers recently in this economy, which appears to be deteriorating every day?
Absolutely. Look, the mood of the workforce was done in January. We all feel a bit better when it's a bit sunny but it was grim. Workers were feeling real pressures around the cost of living. They were feeling real pressures in terms of overwork for many of them. So there's two extremes that were happening. A whole lot of people that were just working way too many hours and didn't feel they were being paid in a way that reflected the effort they put in, but also in the mood of the workforce, we saw what's known as underutilisation, people struggling to get enough hours as the public service cut jobs, as businesses cut hours for people. Now that, of course, was before the fuel crisis starts to kick in. So you add in the fuel crisis and the ongoing mismanagement of our economy, because that's what it is. It is deliberate decisions right now that are not taking us in the right direction. Workers are feeling even worse now as we head into autumn and winter. We've seen more jobs go. We've seen record numbers of receiverships of businesses in the last few months. We have seen really poor increases in the minimum wage. We are seeing wage increases for union members that are not keeping up with the horrendous cost of living increases. And then, of course, it's costing us more to get to work, to get our families to school, to go and do things on the weekends because of the fuel crisis. And what we're hearing on that is that some part-time workers now are just giving up jobs because they're going, it's not worth me turning up. I'm not earning enough to pay my petrol bill. We're seeing full-time workers who are struggling to figure out how to get to work because of the cost of fuel. And we aren't seeing from the government, from the National Party leadership, any sense that they've got a way to deal with this fuel crisis. And that's creating massive uncertainty for workers. And it's making people wonder whether they should just up and quit New Zealand, of course, or quit their jobs. And we don't need that. We need an economy that's thriving. We were promised an economy that was thriving, but this government in 2.5 years has done nothing to help us economically as workers, as family members, as members of our communities. And we've got to hold them to account for that. We've got to ask for better.
I agree. I think it's been quite appalling. It's been very almost like deliberate sabotage. There's been some law changes, speaking of that kind of thing, that really do harm to many workers. One in particular is the Employment Relations Amendment Act. Could you tell us a bit about the key changes in that act and how they are likely to impact workers?
Well, there's a couple of really horrendous parts to that act that we are already saying have to be repealed. One is the way it deals with contractors. I think everybody in New Zealand applauded when the Uber drivers won their case and were moved from being contractors who had to look after their own tax and sick leave and look after everything to being workers by the courts, because the courts said they were workers and they deserve to be treated as workers, and have all those rights that we have as workers. But of course, this government's gone in, taken advice from Uber and said, no, companies, businesses, employers should be able to determine whether you're a worker or a contractor. Now, there's a huge difference in those two words. As a contractor, you're supposed to be able to determine exactly what work you do, when you do it, how much money you're going to charge for it. You're like a self-employed business person. That's not actually the case for contractors in industries like Uber and other platform economy jobs. They don't really get to choose their hours. They just have to take whatever is thrown at them. They don't get a share of the profits. They get minimal salaries. Talking with Uber drivers, they often have to work 16 hours a day to even try and make ends meet. Well, that's ridiculous. That should never be allowed in the New Zealand economy. And we don't think this is something that employers should determine. We need clear rules about the fact that most of us are workers who earn a salary or wage, and we need proper protection and proper support because we don't have power to determine our own hours. We don't have the wherewithal and the things that we need to increase profits for ourselves. So that's really a huge change, and we are going to the International Labour Committee, the CTU, to make sure it's clear that we need better laws around platform economy, around the gig economy. The other big change that will affect a completely different end of the scale of working people is taking away personal grievances for people who earn over a particular amount. Look, if you are a worker, when you go into a personal grievance space, you should be able to think that it will be a genuine and full process. The fact now that you can't seek remedy, well, that's just going to be ridiculous for those workers. And it really does open up almost this idea that, hey, employers can just get rid of you and there's no consequences if they did a bad job or they were at fault. It's putting the power all back with employers. Now, I'm not going to say all employers are bad, but actually employment legislation is supposed to even up the power between workers and employers. Because actually people who own all of the capital, own the factories, own the farms, own the shops, have more already. So we need some way of making sure we're working in an equal partnership. The changes in the ERA really fundamentally drag that away, give us as workers much less power, and that's just not on. And for people who believe in unions and join their unions, they're also taking away easy mechanisms to get people into unions. They're making it a lot less transparent, a lot less easy to join your union. But what I would say is, workers out there, join your union, no matter what the law says. It's really important we stand together. That is where we get power.
There's also the removal of the 30-day rule. What's that about?
Yeah. So the 30-day rule is that bit about making it easy to get people into unions. When you turn up at a workplace, for the first 30 days, you used to be covered if there was a collective agreement by that collective agreement and have all the rights that were in that collective agreement. But now we see the thing that they don't have to offer that collective agreement to you. They can give you an inferior individual agreement. They can put you on whatever terms and conditions they like. So the hard work of unions gets undermined by not joining people into the collective. We know collective agreements are well above the minimums set in law. They're there because we've taken action as workers to make sure we get what we deserve, actually, Gerard. That's the thing. This is about what workers deserve: decent wages, decent conditions, and a say in their workplace. Workers and unions fight really hard for those conditions. Just to say, well, they don't count anymore and we can do whatever we like as employers is really undermining to all workers in New Zealand, because in the end, two collective agreements at the moment get passed on to many people. It is shocking how much they are disregarding the rights of workers, and the responsibility of employers are being lessened. In the Health and Safety Act as well, of course, because they're trying to make changes to the Health and Safety Act where small employers don't have to go through the, high level of compliance is how they determine it. Well, it's not. It's about small employers doing the right thing and keeping their workers safe and making sure everybody goes home at night from their job. And I think that, for me, saying, well, we're going to let some employers off those responsibilities is absolutely abhorrent. Absolutely abhorrent. So we shouldn't be loosening up our compliance, particularly when it comes to people's lives.
Yeah,
and that's what health and safety is about. It's just shocking. And you know, for New Zealanders at the moment, we're already seeing some of the first acts that were put through, like the changes to the ERA. We're already seeing employers making the most of it, and you know, putting people onto individual agreements that are substandard, putting people out there into a whole lot of processes that you know, compliant with the new law, but not really high levels of employment relationships. So we knew employers would take the chance. I guess I'd also put an appeal out there, hopefully, to all the good employers. You actually get lots if you look after your employees.
Yeah, there's a lot of good people out there that care for their people, but this
Yeah.
lawmaking is just, like I said, sabotage. The Employment Leave Bill, that's under review and it's set to
Yeah.
replace the Holidays Act. What does that
Yeah.
mean for workers?
Well, there's a couple of things it means. For some workers, you are going to find that you will lose a whole lot of time off. And there's a couple of ways that is happening through both sick leave and through some of the changes around the calculation of annual leave. But if we just go with the sick leave example, they're going to say part-time workers should only get, you know, the amount of leave that they get in relation to the hours they work. So say if you work 2 days a week, you'll only get sick leave calculated on those 2 days. You won't get 10 days sick leave anymore. So that means, you know, you'll get 2 days sick leave for every 5. Now, the trouble with that is if you get sick and have something like COVID, if you have one of the new influenzas, or if you have a child that gets sick or a person who's elderly that you're a carer for, you'll only be able to take 2 days off. You won't be able to take the whole week. If you do take the whole week, you'll take it at your cost, basically. And who can afford to do that? Who can afford to lose pay? And when I've talked to some of the employers about this, it will mean they'll have more workers turning up sick. And that's not good for business. But for the workers, it means they do have to go, well, I can't stay home and look after my sick child. I'm going to have to send them to daycare sick because I have to go to work, because I have to pay my rent and I have to pay, you know, for food. I have to do all those things. I can't afford to have a drop in income. But also if you work on commission, so that's another group that's going to be severely affected, you'll only get your leave calculated on your baseline salary. That could be thousands of dollars. For some of those people who work in commission fields like, you know, insurance, car sales, you know, real estate. So that will have a huge impact on what you earn every year. And I think for me, and because I do value my time off, and I think we all should. For some people, it's going to mean they'll never be able to take a week-long holiday with their family. They'll lose income if they do. They won't be able to then afford their bills. Who wins if we make that the way leave works in New Zealand? No one. Not our kids, not our grandchildren, not the people we care for, not us. Because do you know what? We need time away from work. We need holidays. And we need the financial security so we can take that time off. And I don't mean grand trips away. I just mean a week where you go and visit some family and you put up the tent in the backyard, or, you know, you go to a batch at a beach. We all need that to be really, really full human beings. So this bill is financially bad for workers, but it's bad for our spirit. It's bad. And when you look at that mood of the workforce that people already feel are undervalued, that they don't get enough time off, this is just going to get worse if this bill goes through. The thing is, it's only in the House at the moment, and we believe that the bulk of the submissions are saying don't go ahead because this bill is too messy, it's going to create too much hardship. It's not, you know, no parliamentarian should go into the House and agree to affect hundreds of thousands of people negatively. That's a really bad approach for our parliament. But when I look at other bills,
bloody terrible. I mean,
it is.
it's just, what's the point of even having a job if you can't take a blooming holiday and actually have a decent life anymore? I mean, it's really wrecking what it means to be a New Zealander and for so many people. I think
Oh,
it does
it
anyway.
absolutely is. But also, I think the other question for me is around the state of our democracy. We've seen several bills this year where almost all the submitters have objected, and our parliament has not listened. Well, I should say the government has not listened, because I know opposition MPs are hearing us, but National Act and New Zealand First are not
Yeah.
hearing
And then when you want to
the
go
work.
on, when you want to go on strike or you want to take some industrial action, they've come after that as well. They've got this partial deductions of pay going on. What's that about? How does that has that manifested Have you seen that manifest in any industrial
At
action?
this stage, it hasn't affected our will to take action because we know as workers, the only thing we can really do is withdraw our labour. We know that what gives us strength. And if you think about some of the groups at the moment taking strike action repeatedly, the firefighters, they have had a year of being in dispute with their employer, and for really good reason, underpaid and equipment that is not fit for purpose. The change in law has not made them think twice. They're going, we owe it not just to ourselves, but to the community to keep this going. So I'm really proud that the union movement is really strong at the moment, and we are not going to let them change the way we do our democratic work and the way we do our fight, which is we do at times have to withdraw labour and we have to take to the streets, which we did on May 1, because you know what? This is our country that they are making economic decisions for, not theirs. And I'm going to say most workers now are going, we are over suffering because of decisions that support the mega wealthy and multinational corporations. We are over being at the bottom of the heap. No more having 10% own 50% of the wealth. We need our share. So I think, it's actually strengthening the resolve to take action, all of these attacks. And we are strong. And look, we're not giving up because actually the future, not just for us, but for all of the kids coming through, all of our mokopuna, their future is on the line right now. If we want them to have good lives and good working lives, we got to keep up the pressure.
You mentioned earlier the minimum wage. The increase this year was very small, about 45 cents. I think the minimum wage is $23.95 an hour. And there was very, very small increases to benefits too. Would you care to comment about that in a cost of living crisis where that's the number one issue with an oil shock on top of it?
Yeah, there's two things I think we should absolutely be reflecting on as a country. The way that wages are going at the moment, actually there's three, means that we have workers living in cars and an increased use in food banks by people who have jobs. And that is shocking. You shouldn't have to beg for food if you're in full-time employment. That is just not on. Actually, no one should have to beg for food. One, we've got the working poor. 1 in 7 children now living in material poverty. Many of them have working parents. That we should never accept economic decisions that mean 1 in 7 children are living in poverty. We can do far better. But we're also seeing for the first time an increase in people living in poverty in older age, and that, older people not being able to afford rent and ending up on the streets. So this is anyone who is on the pension now or on superannuation now. People not heating homes and getting sick, of course. People, again, using food banks and charity to get by. One of the long-standing social services New Zealand has been proud of has been national superannuation and the way we look after older people. That is horrendous now, and we need to look at that. And, the government saying, well, it's going to raise the age to 67 doesn't help anybody. It's not going to resolve that question of poverty while you're an older age. I guess at the other end too, I'm pretty wild that they're kicking students right now. Students who are studying in work or studying at universities and polytechnic and Wānanga need our support. Not just because they need our support, but because we need qualified people coming out at the other end to do all the jobs that are out there. And they, students are so struggling as well because of a whole lot of decisions and because youth unemployment is running so hot. Almost 20-year highs in youth unemployment. We're getting it wrong for everyone.
It's actually almost like if you could just imagine the worst possible thing you could do at the worst possible time, it's double effects on young people to push the eligibility age out because that's just robbing them as well. That's unfair on the younger generations. Burdening students who want to do better with extra debt right now in the middle of the worst possible time. It's just complete insanity, and voters should be seeing this. We've got the budget coming up really soon, 2 weeks' time. We've seen the Australian budget as well. Would you like to comment on what you'd like to see in the budget and what we've seen in Australia?
Well, I tell you what, if we got what the Australian federal government has done, which is they've invested to help people with the cost of living crisis, they've changed some rules around tax so that they actually are looking at better capital gains taxes, their equivalent. They're making it easier to get into housing for workers. They're making changes to ensure that there is money after natural disasters to look after communities and rebuild. They're investing in public services. And, this is the sort of thing we need. The economic decisions we need right now from governments is to invest for a better future, to invest in people and in services and in stability. And why can the Australians do that when actually the hint we've got from Nicola Willis is she's going to cut, and cut some more. And somehow she thinks that approach, which they've applied for 2.5 years, is suddenly going to work. Like they say, if you keep banging your head against a brick wall, you're only going to bleed. Well, that's what she's doing. She's banging her head against a brick wall. It's not going to move. We need entirely different economic decisions coming out. We need decisions that will put people first. And the Australian Council of Trade Unions has fought hard for that in Australia, and they've had some success. We are fighting hard for that. We want working people to get their share of all the good things in life, and we're not going to stop talking about that. We're not going to stop talking about needing a fairer tax system, about help around the cost of living, and investing in social services. We all benefit when there's good healthcare, good education, good roads, good infrastructure. Now is the time to do that. Now is not the time to take the knife to the government's purse.
We keep hearing about debt. Instead of doing all those things like investing, we've got to pay down debt. Debt is more important. Debt is the only thing we need to think of. What do you say to the argument that we've all got to keep suffering, we've all got to go through more hardship, we've all got to tighten our belts, we've got to increase wealth inequality in this country, we can't touch anything about tax? What do you say to that?
We do know that the solution actually is to change our tax base, because New Zealand has a very, very, very light-handed tax for anyone who makes money out of capital on things they own, like, third, fourth, fifth homes that they rent out, or big infrastructure things that they own. So we know we have to change the tax base. At the moment, it falls on wage earners, it falls on salary earners, falls on workers, and they pay the bulk of the tax share. So we do have to make some changes there. But also, I am going to say what we've seen this government do is perhaps shift the debt burden away from us collectively to us privately, because we know workers are using afterpay to buy groceries. Students are using student loans to buy food. We know that people are, getting equity out of houses just to pay their daily costs when they're retired. All those things mean we privately now are picking up the tab. And that actually is really bad debt. And that's something people have to understand. There is good debt and there is bad debt. Good debt is investing in, very forward-thinking things. Personally, it's things like if you can have a mortgage and buy a house, that's actually quite good debt because you get a return on that. Bad debt is when to survive, you have to borrow, you have to use credit cards, you have to have overdrafts, you have to, take money out of your pension. So at the moment, we've got a lot of people taking money out of KiwiSaver just to survive in terms of when they're hitting walls in their lives. So, I would say this government is making much out of nothing with state debt if we look around the world, and they are not understanding the harm they are causing. But also, when you look at the actual truth, National has kept borrowing money. They're just not very honest about it, and they're not very open about it, and they're not investing it in the right people. They've used debt to cover their promises for tax cuts for tobacco companies, to invest in the racing industry, to put into landlords' pockets. We shouldn't be borrowing to give tax breaks to people. We should be borrowing to build a better New Zealand together. And that means investing in workforces, investing in education, investing in housing. So we all have somewhere dry and warm, because, by God, this winter, we're going to see what homelessness in New Zealand is doing to people. and we need to have some solutions. So, you know, there's lots of economic theories out there. This government has made a choice to, for example, saddle students with more private debt rather than us collectively looking after students. That's not a wise economic decision for the country or for students.
Do you have any messages finally for the people out there that are struggling, that are workers, our listeners out there that might be worried about their power bills and their grocery bills and making ends meet? What can we all do to help each other?
Yeah. Look, there's a couple of things, and I recently reflected on one, which is just be understanding when you go out and you interact with workers. You know, when you go to a store and there aren't enough people because the company's cut the number of people working in that shift, be patient. Workers like you deserve you to be as kind as you can to them, because actually at the moment we're all quite miserable at work, and me coming in as a customer and making your life more miserable is not on. Let's accept that the workforce is pushed. Two, I'd always say make sure you join your union. We do know that unionised workforces in New Zealand have had better pay increases than non-unionised workforces. So when you get a part of a union and you work with other workers, you will get better conditions and wages. There is no doubt, even though the law is being stacked against us, it still pays to be in your union. The final thing is, if you want to hear how this budget's going to really affect you, keep an eye on what the Council of Trade Unions does. We're hosting a big community event on Budget Day because we know that the cost of living increases, the government slashing of money into healthcare, into schooling, into all the services we need is not just affecting us in our work lives. It's affecting our communities. It's affecting iwi hapu. It's affecting the future, including all of the climate issues we have to deal with. So we think it's time that we all stood together. So on the 28th of May, we're going to be there with iwi, with community, with environmentalists saying, what does this budget mean for people and planet? Because that is what we should be evaluating our economic decisions on. Not on our gross domestic product, which can be increased it can be increased by really nefarious means. Like we could turn our factories into munitions factories, Gerard, and increase our GDP. I don't think that's the future New Zealanders want. We want GDP that delivers better lives for workers, better lives for our children, better lives for anyone on a benefit and our superannuitants. So we want a budget that's evaluated on its impact on people and planet, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do that with everyone who cares about Aotearoa.
Sandra Grey, thank you very much for talking to us all today. It's been really good to just have everything that you've said reinforced to us, just what the situation really is out there and how important it is that we realise how important our vote is. And to actually make some real changes, we've got to transform things. We've got to invest back in ourselves again. And we've got to get those holidays back from all of us. Thank you very much for your time.
We are worth it, Gerard.
We are worth it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.